Coaches, thanks again for tuning into the Minnesota Basketball Coaching Podcast. Real quick, before we get to Coach Carroll from Marshall, I want to bring you attention to some video breakdowns that I've been doing of local college teams. My first one was on Augsburg University's transition offense. I have another one in the works here that will be released shortly on St. John's ball screen offense. I think it's really good content that is applicable to coaches at the youth and high school ranks. It's college teams, but it's teams that are running stuff that I truly feel that can be ran at the high school level. So check that out. You can access the content at gumroad.com. That's GUMROAD.com/Coach Cloutier. Cloutier, Cloutier. I appreciate it. Take a look. I think it's good stuff that can help your programs. All right, so we are here with Marshall head coach Travis Carroll. Coach, thanks for joining today.
Well, thanks for having me, Coach Cloutier.
First thing we always do is we ask what your coaching Wikipedia page is. So give us a little background on where you're from, where you played, and then what led you to Marshall.
Okay. I grew up in Fulda, Minnesota, which is about 45 miles to the south of Marshall. My dad was a assistant coach, basketball coach growing up. So obviously had that parent that was a coach, and obviously both my parents were educators as well. So had a great experience growing up, and had a fun experience with through my high school season. And you know, my dad was definitely my role model going through and becoming a coach. And had a chance to go to Ridgewater Community College for a year. Played basketball a year there with Coach Mike Johnson, and then from there kind of hung up the shoes and wanted to go down to Southwest Minnesota State just to be a student. And actually one of the people that were in a lot of my classes was Coach Bigler. So had a chance to get to know him at a young age. And then after graduating college, went to Redwood Valley High School and coached under Todd Iverson, was the JV coach. And Dave Matson, the brother of Joe Matson at Mankato East, was actually one of the assistant coaches at Redwood Valley, and had a great staff. Also had Dave Holman there, who his son was a really good player that went through Redwood a few years before that. And then went to Leroy Ostrander for 4 years after that. Had a chance to work with Jason Herber, who's now the head coach at Plainview Elgin Melville. And then after that 4 years at Leroy Ostrander, decided to try something different. And in terms of where I was teaching and coaching at, my middle brother actually was living near the Dallas, Texas area. So I went down to, it was a 6A school, Flower Mound Marcus, and near the Dallas area. I actually coached at one of the junior highs. We had 3 junior highs that fed into the high school, and had a chance to coach, you know, with 6A football down there and their basketball program. Danny Henderson was actually the coach at Flower Mound Marcus. And when I was there, we actually had Marcus Smart was one of the players at that high school that came through. He's now in the NBA. And then Phil Forte was also in the same group as Marcus Smart. So had a chance to be part of a program that had those 2 players on it. The Coach Henderson was great there, even though I was one of the junior high coaches. He'd always invite the junior high coaches to sit on the bench with the varsity, and that was a great experience with a really high level basketball. And then I wanted to get back home and use my connection with Coach Bigler and our friendship, and he had a GA position that was open at SMSU, and came back to Marshall and was a grad assistant with Coach Bigler for 1 year. And then it was kind of a 2-year commitment, and the Marshall High School job opened up. And after being 1 year GA with SMSU and Coach Bigler, applied for and received the job with Marshall High School, teaching at the elementary school and the boys basketball coach. So it was kind of a big circle. Kind of started in the Marshall area and had a chance to kind of, you know, go have a lot of good experiences along the way, and end up back in Marshall. So very thankful to have the opportunity to coach and teach here.
I won't ask you any, for Coach Bigler's sake, I won't ask any college stories about him, but I do want to know one thing that you learned, or a couple of things, or big things that you learned coaching with him as a GA for that 1 year at Southwest that you're able to instill in your program at Marshall.
Yeah, Coach Bigler has a great relationship with his players, and you know, I think he's a wonderful person, and you know, he has a real strong connection with his players, and you can just see how he makes connections with his players, and the amount of time that he puts into even his summer camps. I mean, summer camps are a big part of their program and big part of the Marshall community, and just how he gets his hands dirty and he worked hard at those summer camps. But he does a great job of making connections with his players, and does a great job of being part of the community. And, he's a great role model and a great friend and a great person to learn from.
Maybe more just a personal interest question on my end. I've always kind of wondered how this works. Obviously, you're a 3A school, but by no means you guys don't have 600-700 kids graduating from Marshall High School. But a good size 3A, but by no means metro size school. But you also have a big Division II NSIC college in your town. So how do you balance like running camps? Because I think that's really intriguing to you. Is obviously there's got to be some communication between the high school and the colleges, but just how does that look in the summer?
That's a great question. I mean, communication, as you said, Coach Bigler and I will talk about when he's going to run his camps in the summer, and we actually will try to do our K through 8 camp at the end of May before they get started up with their summer camps. And with everything that's gone on this year, we actually moved ours to this week in August just because we weren't able to do it in May. But communication's a big thing because, as a high school coach, I mean, we have another program in our community that's looking to provide an opportunity for our youth kids, and we're not going to compete with that. We're going to say, hey, we're going to offer what we can offer, and we're going to say, let's go across the street and go to their camps as well. And we are very fortunate to have that opportunity to have more than just our high school program trying to have an opportunity for kids to compete. We have the college there as well, and it's very important that we have a strong relationship with the SMSU men's program because it's a benefit to their program to have kids involved in their programs because it's part of their financial end and it's a big part for us in developing kids. And it's important that we work hand in hand. And Coach Baylor does an awesome job with his camps, and we're excited when our kids have a chance to go and do their camps. And unfortunately, they weren't able to do camps this summer, and that's definitely an impact on our program as well.
So you mentioned the big circles, a student at Southwest State, then getting back as a GA and now coaching in the town of Marshall. And so what did you mentioned going to stops at successful high schools. Redwood Valley had a successful staff, then you Leroy Ostrander, then ended up in Dallas. What's the first thing that you looked to do when you took over the Marshall program?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think just bringing the kids together. I mean, just it was at the end of the summer when it happened, and the kids. There was a long period of time between when the job was open and when it was filled. And I think there was a lot of uncertainty with the kids as to what's going on. Why was there, if it was a month or whatever it may have been before it was filled, as to getting the kids in a room, having the kids getting a chance to see me, and having that first communication before the end of the summer, because it was the last week of July when I took the job at Marshall High School, and kids are wrapping up, and you don't want kids to go into their fall sports before having a chance to meet who they're going to be working with in the winter, because you have to start building those relationships, and those relationships start on the very first day that you meet them. And it was just building that relationship, seeing the kids, having the kids see me, and just to have the kids have a chance to try to get to know me as well as they could in that short amount of time.
Part of your at Marshall, you've had a lot of success with been to the state tournament, been in section finals, and I want to see your side of it. A couple of years ago, you played in a pretty unique game against Waseca in the section final over at Gustavus College, and you guys were on the wrong end of that. So I don't want to open up any wounds or reopen any wounds here for it. I'm just curious because I know it was ESPN got national coverage of it and that sort of thing. How did you handle that with your team and some of the adversity that you faced from that really, really tough defeat in the section final?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's been a few years, so those wounds aren't what they were at one point in time. And my wife would be one to tell you that it was probably a tough stretch to be around the house, after that had happened. But, at the end of the day, life is about adversity. Life is about handling things that you may not think is fair at times. And, we talk about that with kids, and we got to experience that firsthand in terms of the game. It was an amazing game. Went 4 overtimes and got all that attention. But there was a team that was on the wrong end of that game, and that was us. And it was important to see how we were going to respond to it. And, we had a chance. The Timberwolves actually invited both teams up to the Timberwolves game that Saturday, 2 days later. And it was great for us the next day, because there's no way to really speak to a team after a game like that, right after a game. That was, that's a difficult moment as a coach. So it was good to be able to bring the kids in, to a classroom the next day and talk to them and, about this opportunity that we had to go to the Twin Cities. And that situation with being able to go to that Timberwolves game let us have another moment together as a team. We got to go on the bus. We got good treatment from the Timberwolves, and that was a very good thing for our team in terms of, we didn't leave the locker room after that game and not see the kids until the summer. We got to see the kids a couple of days later, and we got to have a different experience to end the season. The following year, our team ended up going to the section finals and making it to the state tournament. So I thought our kids responded really well. And that summer following that game was very important for us. We had, we got a very competitive summer schedule because, we wanted to challenge our kids as much as we could. And those kids coming back from that game, adversity, they've been through the adversity of basketball games. And what we saw the next year, we weren't going to see that type of adversity because I don't, even as a coach, it was a tough loss, but I don't expect to ever see a situation like that again as a coach. And, if it does happen again, you learn from those experiences and how you handle those. But we were very proud of the way the kids handled that situation in that game and coming back the following year and qualifying for the state tournament.
I actually was at that Grand Rapids game then at the next year at the state tournament, and I actually sat just a handful of rows behind your bench, and I really watched how you and your staff interacted in your guys' program. And I was extremely impressed with how you handle yourself in the sidelines, how you interact with your players, how you interact with your assistant coaches, and I took a lot of notes just as a young coach watching the success that you had and how you handle yourself on the sideline. And we'll get to some of the culture type stuff in your program because I've just always been amazed from afar at the positive culture and the way your guys handle themselves on the basketball court. But I want to talk about what that was like the next year getting to the state tournament in a community that I'm sure really gets behind their high school sports. I remember watching our girls basketball team go down the state tournament and play Marshall a handful of years ago, and there's a good turnout from Marshall. And what was that like then after that, awful section final game the year before, being able to get the group to the state tournament the next year, and then what that meant for your basketball community?
That's big. Our community support is amazing. Our community does a great job of coming out to our games during the season. And when we get to the postseason, our community does a good job of following us as well. And, we had a great following that year to the state tournament. And, it was very rewarding for those kids to have those opportunities to get back up to the cities. And, we're very lucky to have the support that we have in our community. Even the parents of our kids, in the summertime, we ask for a lot of commitment in all of our sports that our kids do. And, our families are very understanding of, they are going to try to provide their kids the best opportunities that they can in each of their programs. And, we're very lucky with where we're at in Marshall and with the families that we have and the community support that we have. And, it was definitely a fun opportunity for those kids during that season.
You have a lot of athletes in your program who are football players, baseball players, multiple sport athletes, something that isn't seen as much as maybe it even was 5, 10, 20 years ago in high school sports. So what are some ways that you're able to tap into that and make that a successful basketball season when maybe you don't have your guys as much, but also speak to the culture of Marshall sports? Because you guys are successful in a lot of sports. It's not just a basketball thing. So talk about the Tiger culture and then also how you're able to work with football, work with baseball, work with those other sports. Because then, year in and year out, you have scholarship level football players and who maybe have to buy into maybe a lesser role in basketball than they had in football. So how do you go about and addressing those roles with your guys, but also talk about the culture at Marshall High School?
Definitely. We have to have great relationships with the other coaches. When we're doing our summer stuff, we're going with our guys between 9 and 11, and then football's probably picking them up at 11:15, 11:30, and they may be having baseball practice from 7 to 9 in the morning. So those kids are they're doing these 3 activities back to back to back, and it's very important as coaches as we're not overlapping, because the last thing we want to do is make those kids choose between those activities. And we try to, even when we schedule our tournaments, we like to do a lot of breakdowns with our basketball team, and we ended up getting a situation we try to go more during the week to the breakdowns, because a lot of times on the weekends they'll have baseball tournaments, and it's just like, well, that's our chance to get our guys together in the gym, and that's when we'll look to do it. But it's very important that we have that relationship with the football and baseball programs. As that team you're talking about a few years ago, we had Reese Winkleman, who's now defensive end at South Dakota State University, he started as a freshman on our basketball team, and now he's playing at SDSU for football. We had Blaze Andrews, who's playing at the University of Minnesota on their offensive line, and and we also had Trey Lance, who's at North Dakota State, the quarterback, North Dakota State. All three of those guys were on that team, and those guys bought into the weight room for both, for all their programs, and they did a great job of getting in the weight room. And one thing you'll find with the guys, they didn't like to lose. They like to compete, and it was basically, well, I'll take whatever role I have to have in order to help our team win. I mean, Blaze offensive lineman, that's the most unselfish position on the football field, because they're hugging the running backs and quarterbacks after touchdowns, and that was they were very unselfish. And this past year's team, we had Y.A. Black, who's at the University of Iowa playing football now. He'll be going as a defensive end. And we had Trey Steinbach, who's looking to be a linebacker or tight end at North Dakota State University. I mean, we've had some good kids rolling through that have been, especially at our post positions, that have, they've been football players and post players in basketball. And I just like our post guys have been very unselfish, and it's been awesome having those guys. And even though they were D1 football players, they wanted to win during basketball season, and they did whatever it is they could to help our team win games. And we're very fortunate that we have that mentality and that culture with our kids at Marshall High School.
We talked about camps earlier with you balancing your summer camps with what Coach Bigler is doing over at Southwest State. You also mentioned when we were pre-talking or texting yesterday about some of the strengths that you have. And one thing you mentioned was that there was a really solid and sound youth program set up for you and you took over. But I have to think that you put some of your own touches on that. So what were some things that you've improved with your youth program? So part one, and then what are some things that your youth program does that you really like and that I think other youth programs could learn from?
Our head assistant coach is Mike Christensen. A lot of people might know him as Iron. He's been running our youth program for over 25 years now. I mean, it's like I came to Marshall and had a setup of the youth program that he developed, and it's awesome. I mean, we have a fall league for 3rd through 6th graders that starts, and we'll start that. We'll go for 6 weeks in the months of October, November, early December. It's in-house. We're not going playing any other area schools, but we'll have enough kids where we can run workouts, work on the fundamentals, and they can have games as we get farther into our fall league. And that leads into our traveling season, which is for 4th through 8th grade, but it's a big advantage for our 3rd through 6th graders to, have that fall league and that 6 weeks of basketball before they start traveling. And I think that's huge for our program. And it's important that our kids are running the system that we're looking to run. I mean, they're not going to, obviously it's going to be more complex as they get older, but with what we're trying to run for an offense, we are teaching that at the youngest of age levels and building up as they continue to get older. And, defensively, we have some fundamentals on defense that we expect all of our youth teams, all the way from 3rd grade all the way to the seniors, that, there's some fundamentals on defense that we expect out of each of those groups. And it's important to have those fundamentals and, lock in on those things. So that way, as they continue to get older, they understand the expectations when they get to that 9 through 12 program.
What are the numbers for your in-house fall league?
Good question. We'll run 3rd and 4th together, and that can run anywhere mid 30s, low 50s, and 5th and 6th grade can kind of be that right around that 40 number. We had a large number of kids that have been going through the last few years, so those numbers have kind of spiked up a little bit over the last few years, but it definitely gives us enough to provide, anywhere from 4 to 6 teams playing against each other when they do their in-house games, and allows us to provide a lot of good competition for those kids.
How many of those kids then travel during the winter season?
I'd say if we had a group of 14 kids in a grade, you're probably looking at 11 or 12 of those kids will travel. And that number is usually a higher percentage as they get older. 4th grade may be a little bit lower because they're not quite sure if they want that travel doing all those tournaments. But as they get into 5th and 6th grade, those numbers usually rise. If they're doing fall league, they're normally traveling as well.
You mentioned that you try to run some of the same stuff offensively at your youth level that you run at the high school level. Can you speak to maybe what's some of the coach educating that you have with your youth coaches, or if you run a coaches clinic, or what are some ways that you're able to get those coaches on board and educate them for what you want their offense to look like?
We'll have a meeting before the start of their travel season, and we run an offense you've had Coach Bigler on, he talked about Phoenix, and we have that Phoenix and with our youth program, and it's an offense that it's one that has good spacing, and just explaining the spacing of the youth coaches and just giving them a few tips as to what you can do with that Phoenix offense to make it, beneficial for a fourth grade group, and what you can tell the seventh grade coaches to what they can do with their Phoenix and when they run it. And we also have another side ball screen offense that we don't introduce that necessarily with our third and fourth graders, but as they hit that fifth and sixth grade level, we'll have those coaches run that side ball screen offense, because it can be a little bit more difficult for kids to understand where to go with that offense. But definitely just showing those coaches, the spacings and where to be at on the floor, and what you can do to tweak the offense to make it more beneficial for their age groups is something we try to communicate to those coaches.
What are some ways that you're able to install that with your youth kids and have your youth program run that ball screen offense, but not getting kids too pigeonholed into being a ball screener and this guy's being a guard who uses ball screens?
When we run our fall league, we'll have our kids run through it, and then we'll say, go a new spot. I mean, if you're the point guard, you gotta learn to be the 5-man. If you're the 5-man, you gotta learn to be the point guard, because by the time you're in ninth grade, you may have grown a lot, or you may not have grown much at all, and you can't just be a post. You got to be able to be a post or a guard, and that's what we like to tell our kids is you're not pigeonholed at that age, and you got to move. You got to go to different spots, and it's important to explain that to the youth coaches as well, so that way the kids have opportunities to play different spots. And sharing the basketball is really big, and just trying to find ways to help those players understand how to share the basketball along with the youth coaches. Is so what can we do to get the basketball in other players' hands to help develop these players in game type situations.
You mentioned on the same token that you also defensively is the same, and that you want them running some of your same principles at the youth level. So what do you want? What are some of the rules or the parameters that you give your youth coaches? Maybe it's man versus zone, pack versus more aggressive, press half court, whatever the case may be. What are some parameters that you give your youth coaches in helping them gauge what type of defense to run with their fourth grade or seventh grade or eighth grade traveling team?
We're man to man. On the ball defense is very important. In terms of playing time as they get older, if you are not defending the ball, it's going to be hard for you to play in our system. And we spend a lot of time going through drills on the ball defense, and just what can we do to help those players out. And there's different drills that we'll run with our older kids that we'll share with our younger coaches, so what they can do in their practices. And these kids they're just going to continue to improve in these drills. I mean, it's not always going to look great at a young age level, but when they come back the next year, or they come to our summer camp, they're going to say, all right, this is what we worked on this with our youth coaches, and now we're working on it with the high school coaches, and we've done this drill before, and we're going to be better at it the next time than what we were the first time or the last time that we did that drill.
So let's move into your varsity program, and let's get in a little bit more deeper into the X's and O's from your, we'll start offense. We'll come back to defense. We've talked about, what it looks like at the youth level, but I want to jump in and talk about offense with your guys. You mentioned you run the Phoenix, or the continuity, or the spread ball screen type offense that Southwest runs. What are some of your main teaching points that you're looking for that you teach, year in and year out, or some of the main reads or the main looks that you're having at the varsity level with your ball screen offense?
It's important that we're getting post touches and we're getting action in the rim. I know this summer we've had a chance to do a little bit with our kids, and we haven't seen the post touches that we'd like to see, and that's something we're going to have to emphasize next year. But we have to be able to, we are looking to attack the lane area, because that's just going to open it up for our teammates. We're at our best when we have 5 or 6 guys that can go double figures. I mean, there's been seasons where we haven't had that, and it's been a struggle for us, once we come down to the end of the season. So it's very important that, these players are able to score outside the 3-point line, inside the 3-point line, score trying to go to the rim. I mean, it is very important that our players are working on that to improve in those areas. So that way, when we get in our game situations, we're a team, can't key on one guy, and they can't key on trying to stop a certain action against our kids, as to where we need to be. We have to be able to score in a lot of different ways offensively. And, our kids really bought into that this past season. I thought our kids did a great job of buying into that. We had 6 kids who could go double figures on any night. And our first guy off the bench was probably our third or fourth leading scorer during the season. And just buying into roles on the team is very important as well. And I think our kids have done a good job with that. And offensively, we're always trying to tweak as well, because we're not going to just go in the game and say, well, Marshall's going to do two things. Because, teams are going to be able to prepare, whether if it's, they go against the Phoenix actions, teams might be able to try to do some things to try to slow that down. We have to have other things that we can go to, whether if it's our side ball screen action or some other tweaks that we try to put in during the season. And this past year, we were able to throw a lot more different things at our kids than what we've been able to do in past years. So where when we were running our Phoenix, it was hard for teams to defend it, because they're trying, there's 5 to 7 other things that we were trying to do as well during the game. And it was a credit to our kids' ability to retain all that stuff we were trying to do and to attack it the way that, the way that we were trying to coach them to attack it.
How have you found is the most effective way to get post touches within your ball screen offense?
Well, a lot of reminding to our players. We'll have some actions in our Phoenix action where the kids understand that a post touch is expected. And, there's every year we will go through stretches in multiple games where we're not getting that done. And then we're having to bring the kids in and remind them at the end of the day, it's up to the kids to buy into that. And, one thing that we try to tell our kids is our post players are some of our best passers. We have good perimeter shooters. Like, get the ball inside, and you're going to be able to spot up and find an open look, because they're going to have to do something to try to help inside. And, our two YA and Trey Steinbach this year were great passers, and our guys were more than happy to give them the ball, because they knew they were either that someone was probably going to get an open look if the defense was going to try to help down on them. So it's just buying into that. All right, here's what happens when we get the ball inside. And, that's, our kids have bought into getting it inside, and that's something we need to continue to do.
Do you usually play one true big, or do you ever mix in running a second true big?
This year we ran 2 bigs, and then we'd probably run one out early in the run, just because that allowed us, we could put one of our bigs on the perimeter, and we were able to do some things. So even though he was outside the 3-point line, we were able to get him inside the 3-point line pretty quickly. And then our side ball screen action we played 2 bigs, go with 2 bigs and 3 wings. So we started 2 bigs this year, and we were able to have success with that. And one thing we had was we had Noah Pitts, who's going to University of Sioux Falls to play basketball next year. He's a 6'5", 6'6". We played him anywhere from the 1 spot to the 5 spot, and it was very difficult for teams to match up with him. And it was to have a 6'5", 6'6" kid who can run your point, but also if they got a small on him, we can get him touches inside, and he played very physical. So we definitely were able to run a lot of different lineups with our team this year, which is probably one of the biggest benefits that we had, with just the size and the physical strength and the athleticism and the height that we had in other areas with kids.
We run a similar type of spread ball screen type offense. We've ran it more from a 5-out setting this past year. The year before, we ran it with a more of a traditional big. Where we've always had some issues is that if teams defend that initial ball screen really well, and we don't have any step of an advantage of flowing into another action, sometimes kids get stuck expecting something to come from that first ball screen, and they kind of get stuck standing or waiting or not being a threat. What are some things that you found that have worked to keep that ball moving and keep your team aggressive, and not just standing and hoping that that first ball screen leads to an advantage that will then lead to a basket?
Yeah, that's definitely a problem that we've had with our kids in the past. And this year these past few years, we've broken it down after we make that pass as to where we need to be. The guy making the pass a lot of times was going to the wrong spot to begin with. And we really had to break it down. Okay, you made the pass. This is where you need to go to clear out. So once we make that first pass, the guy who catches that first pass, the expectation is you're attacking the rim and looking to create for yourself or looking to create for a teammate. And this year we were able to have, once we made that first pass, whoever caught that second pass, that guy had just as good of a chance getting to the rim as our point guard did off the ball screen. And if we had to make a third pass, our kids had confidence on that third pass, being able to understand where they were supposed to go after the pass for the spacing of our offense. And the guy who caught the third pass was just as capable of getting to the rim as well. And it was just the benefit of what we had for personnel this year with the amount of ball handlers that we had along with our bigs. It may not be the case next year or the year after that. Sometimes a lot of it comes down with the personnel of the kids, and the kids understanding what they need to work on in order to be able to get to the rim, whether if it's with their right hand or left hand, or a secondary move that they got to use to get to the basket.
What type of ball screen coverage, and you don't have to answer this because I don't know if maybe Joe or any other section teams are listening to this, but what ball screen coverage do you guys tend to have the most trouble with?
Switching. I think switching's hard. I mean, that's once you run into those better teams, they're able to switch better. I mean, Mankato East is definitely a team that could switch on us. St. Peter was able to do that. Mankato West will be a strong team in our section this year. And when they switch those ball screens, I mean, they're saying that they can match up with their 5 guy defending your point guard, which they were able. A lot of teams, as you get the competition continues to improve, they can do that. And then getting a point guard on your post, they're saying that their point guards are able to get in the proper position on their post defense. And it was once you tried posting up against those point guards, that people are sending help, looking to get tips and steals that way. And kids recognizing that, if we're on offense, if we got a point guard in our post, we're staring the pass down while the other team's sending a guy down there to help out on that pass, where it might be the skip pass is the one they have to make rather than the pass to the post. Because if you throw that skip pass, then that's where you may have a better chance to find the post, against that type of switching defense. But we see a little bit of everything. I mean, teams will pack it in. There's a lot of teams that we see during the year, they'll pack it in, and then our kids will fall in love with the 3-point shot without getting action to the rim. And some nights that's what bothers us the most, because if we're not making a shot, that can definitely get in a player's mind. And sometimes their mentality is, well, I missed one, I'll make my next one. Well, then we're calling timeout after 5 or 6 trips down where we're not getting what we are hoping to see on our offense. So we definitely have had troubles with teams that have packed it in. And hard shows. I know that we ran into Faribault a couple of years ago. They were hard showing us, trapping us hard every time, and we just could not figure out what we were doing against that. And I think all three of those things can cause you problems depending on the night, and just if we're getting the kids to execute. And I think switching is probably the one that can be the most challenging, just because that means athletically a team is a real strong athletic team and is able to defend that better.
For teams that aren't familiar with Marshall, do you guys like to get out and run, or are you looking to kind of grind it into your half court stuff? And then if you are running, or what does your transition attack look like that helps you flow into your ball screen offense?
We like to run. There's games in the season where we could probably run and continuously run and get, but we can't depend on that, because as we get in the section tournament, we're not going to be the most athletic team out there. Once we run into teams like East and West and St. Peter's, they're going to be able to be in the right spots in their transition defense, and we have to be able to run through our offense and get the looks that we need. We like to flow into our Phoenix where we're spacing out, running down the floor, kind of that 4 out, and then that 5-man, he's kind of reading his man, whether if his man is trailing or not as to where he goes in our transition, in terms of if he's setting a high ball screen or if he's looking to get down on the block, looking to post up. But we definitely try to transition into our Phoenix action, so that way, we don't have to reset once we get back down on offense if our transition offense isn't there. But we like to pride ourselves on we're able to run, but we're also going to be able to not run and be able to score that way as well, because it's going to have to be like that during the season.
Yeah, we ran into a family friend of yours in Coach Fensky up in Hermantown in our section final. And I think both of us were top 10 or so in Class 3A in scoring, and everyone thought that game was going to be in the 80s. But when you get to a section final and everyone's got film on everyone, and you've seen the team before, and you've live scouted them in the semifinals, and their stuff, and it's game 29 on the season, there's not a lot of hiding. That everyone kind of knows what everyone's going to do, and so you really have to be good in the half court. So I think that's a good point that you mentioned, that when you run into teams in that section semifinals, section finals, that you have to be able to be really good in the half court. Because I think sometimes that can be the struggle with when teams that run, is that they aren't ready when that game does slow down in March, which it inevitably will. So do you have any go-to sets before we get to defense? What are any go-to sets or actions within your Phoenix when, that you save, or little wrinkles that you'll use when you really need a basket?
It kind of depends on the game. I mean, we'll try to switch it up from game to game and just try to see what the other team may be doing defensively, to try to see what our go-to action may be in that game. And, a lot of times it may not be a go-to action in Phoenix. It might be getting out of Phoenix and running something different and kind of trying to confuse the defense, and then coming back to our Phoenix to where it's going to open up our Phoenix better. And sometimes it's just timing that out during a game to where we're changing it up enough during a game to where it's going to open up more of our basic offense and actions we like to run. But, a lot of times it depends on where a kid is at on the floor too. If our best shooter's in one spot, then it's going to change what type of call we're giving our kids and our Phoenix as to if your four-man who doesn't shoot the ball well on offense is at. So that may change an action that you think may work well, but you may have a different kid in that spot. So then you have to kind of change the action or call that we're looking to make from the sideline to try to put kids in a better position with their strengths.
Man-to-man program for you guys on defense. What are some of your philosophies within that are you pack aggressive? Do you mix pressure in at all? What are some of the basic philosophies, and then also your non-negotiables or things that your kids have to do defensively?
We have to be able to defend the ball on the drive. I mean, we do work on rotating defense is very important to work on and to understand, but there are challenges with rotations. We might get one guy to rotate over well, and then the second or third or fourth rotations aren't there, and it leads to an open look. And that's not something we're going to depend on is to be a rotating defense. I mean, we're going to challenge our guys to defend the drive, but we need to understand when we have to rotate and where we need to be on our rotations. But, that's not something we're going to continuously do during a game. Fundamentals are going to be big. I mean, when we talk fundamentals, I mean, transition defense is very important to us because it's once we get into the section tournament, we're not going to be able to, we need to be able to defend in transition. And, it's there's fundamentals of the communication, understanding personnel in transition, understanding, who the other, the personnel, understanding who the players are on the other team. And, your five man's on the point guard. They need to understand what the point guard's going to be trying to do for a strength. So, that's very important. Limiting teams to one shot is, we pride ourselves on trying to be a physical basketball team, and we try to limit teams to one shot, and we want each shot to be contested that they take during games, because teams will make contested shots, but if they have to continuously try to make contested shots during the game, we're going to hopefully on offensively be able to create more uncontested shots than the other team. And that goes back to our defense. And we had a very athletic, very physical team this year who could have just lived on the offensive end, but we were able to have those kids buy into the defensive end. And I think that was definitely one of the biggest keys to our success this year, was their ability to buy in defensively and try to stop teams and slow the other teams down.
You mentioned limiting teams to one shot. Obviously, you have some athletic, physical, scholarship level football kids that have come through your program, but there definitely is a piece of teaching that I'm sure you're good at. So how do you teach rebounding? I think that's one thing that can at times, especially in the more modern game when teams are shooting more threes, which means there's in general more misses. How are you teaching rebounding?
We're teaching our kids not to run to the basket. We're trying to stay in our area, keep our man behind us, and once that ball's coming off the rim, we're chasing it down. There are times where we don't do well enough in terms of checking our guy out and moving our feet defensively. And there's games where we've had a bad game. We'll get just back to our fundamental drills of rebounding the next day, just as a reminder to our kids as to what we need to do. And we try to get that into each of our practices, and just for the kids to understand that this is a big part of our success, because we like to tell our kids, we like to run. Once we get a rebound, we like to run, but we're not running if teams are getting 2, 3, 4 shots on us in a possession. And our offense is much better when we're able to hold teams to one shot, and you're able to get going in transition.
Like you mentioned, it's a lot easier to run when you don't have to go the extra, 8 to 12 feet to take the basketball out of bounds, then go that extra 8 to 12 feet back the other way. If you can just get that rebound and run, that's a big way in getting your pace up and improving your tempo. Closeouts, what do you guys teach for closeouts? Are you one hand, two hand? Are you the more traditional squeak with your feet? What are some ways, if you're going to be good on the ball, I'm sure closeouts are an important part of your program. And so what are some ways that you're teaching closeouts?
Right now we're one hand. In the past, there's been times where we've been two hands, and I think that's something that can change. We're big on when we're closing out, the distance that we're closing out. We talk about proper distance when we're reaching out on the guy on offense is to, where our hands can be at on the opposing player. And, we obviously try to teach our kids not to be too close and not too far away, and be able to reach out and be able to touch that basketball or the player's jersey, and just try to try to simplify it that way, and definitely understanding, if you're playing against a shooter, it's going to be a little bit tighter than you might be against someone whose first option may not be to shoot, and just understanding who you're closing out on as well.
You mentioned that you have some really good assistant coaches that obviously help develop player development and prepping and all that sort of stuff. What are some ways that you empower your assistant coaches to have a voice within your program?
That's a good question. We have an amazing group of assistants this year, and with our 9th and 10th grade coaches, we'll have them run during our varsity practices. We'll bring one of those guys over and run the opposing team's offense, and they'll be running the opposing team's offenses with the varsity, and Coach Christensen kind of locks in our defense, and our other two assistants, 9th and 10th grade coaches, they're very involved in our offense along with Coach Christensen, and to bring in wrinkles or new ideas. Because when I first took the job, our side ball screen offense was there before I took the job, and it was something that one of the best decisions probably made was keeping it. So that's something that's been there long before I was there, and these assistant coaches have great ideas, and it's important to listen and ask them with, all right, we're struggling with sideline out of bounds plays. You got sideline out of bounds during practice today. Show us your 3 best ones that you have, or inbound plays underneath. What do you have there? And it's important to keep the coaches engaged. And it's definitely something, as the more years I'm going into this, the more hands off I'm becoming with certain areas of with what we're running in practice, just because of what our assistant coaches are able to do. And it's awesome with the assistants that we have with Coach Long, Coach Johnson, and Coach Christensen, because they bring a lot to the table and a lot of great ideas. And there's a lot of help that as head coaches that we need in certain areas to try to make our team a better team.
What are some roles or responsibilities that they have during games?
Whether if it's rotations, whether if it's what the other teams are doing offensively, what we're doing offensively, what may be working, what may not be working. Angle ball screens. I mean, there's the way teams are defending our ball screens. They might say, we need to adjust the angle that we're setting our ball screens. This is going to open up our offense better. Some things, as a coach, as I'm on the sidelines, like, yeah, I didn't see that at all. And they're really good at picking up the fine details that may be going on during the game.
And then last question here, practice structure. Talk to me about what a normal, maybe not quite end of the year, maybe not tryout period, but like a January practice or late December practice looks like for the Marshall Tigers.
Well, we're going to we'll have the plan out. Hopefully, hopefully we follow through on the structure of it. We'll have quite a bit of defense. We like to, defense is something that we're going to pride ourselves on, and we're going to spend each day, whether if it's transition defense, boxing out, rebounding, defending the drive on defense. Offensively, we may look to break our offenses down. Not going to always be traditionally 5-on-5. We may do some 3-on-3, some 4-on-4 actions before we get into our live 5-on-5 stuff. And team building drills are important. It's important that we're doing drills to get whether if it's a shooting drill, getting the energy going up, a charge drill in practice, getting that energy going up. Those are important things. And end of the game situations are very important. Once you get into crunch time and the close games, you get in your tournament play, you're going to run into that game where it's a 8-point game with 5 minutes left to go in the game. I mean, what are we going to do offensively to try to get baskets if we're down 8? What are we going to do offensively if we're ahead by 8 points? And what are we going to be doing in these situations, because those situations are coming at us, and we need to be prepared and not look at each other and say, well, what are we going to do? We have to have the confidence and the prep. And we learned a lot this past year. We had a couple tough situations with our end of the games, and we were able to take that back into practice and implement it. And I thought our kids did a really good job at the end of the season with their end of the game situation.
How much time during the course of a week would you say that you take for special situations?
In terms of like end of the game situation, inbounds,
anything, any specific situation. Yeah. Like, I mean, okay. I guess I should say, you mentioned like up 8, down 8, what would you do in that situation? So yeah, when you're running through scenarios, how much time would you say over the week do you take for that?
We would hopefully implement that if we have a 5 practice week, 4 out of those 5 practices, if not 5 practices, we're implementing that. May not be a 5-minute situation, maybe a 1-minute situation, but we're doing some type of situation, end of the game. We're hopefully doing that, if not every practice, almost every practice during the week.
Coach, good stuff. Last question here, not necessarily basketball related. If and when Trey Lance becomes if he puts his name in the NFL draft this spring, are you ready for the abundance of phone calls from executives that your phone's gonna be blowing up throughout the spring?
Oh, I think someone else will be receiving those calls, but we're very excited for Trey. I mean, what a great kid, what a great family. We actually have his younger brother Bryce, who's going to be a senior this year, who's also having a wonderful career. But Trey's a very grounded person, one of the best players we've ever had to coach. And one thing we say about Trey is he was of all the guys that we've coached in the last 8 years, he probably hated to lose the most, and he was a very competitive player. And with the position that he plays at North Dakota State, winning is something that they're known to do. And that was something that was right up Trey's alley, because he's someone who's very competitive, who does not like to lose. And we're very excited for what his future may hold. But that's as those things go, those things are kind of one day at a time with the way things are going right now. But we're definitely excited for Trey and all of his accomplishments that he's had once he graduated from Marshall High School.
Coach, I appreciate you taking time to jump on the podcast and share the wealth of knowledge and what you guys do at Marshall, because you guys had a lot of success, and I think coaches will leave listening to this with a lot of information that they can bring back to their program. So thanks, Coach.
Well, thanks for your time. Really appreciated it. And best of luck to everyone out there. And hopefully things get better sooner.
We can only hope. Thanks, Coach.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.